Okay, here we go. Here we go. I'm here. I'm here. I'm here. Let's talk about Studio Series Bumblebee movie Ratchet. So to kick things off, I am aware that there are problems with this figure and that there are certain figures, I don't know that it's all of them. From what I understand, it seems to be kind of random that some have this problem, some don't, where the white plastic starts yellowing like really noticeably in places and just kind of randomly, and it's not always the same spots for different people, but like sometimes it'll start yellowing and other times it won't. I seem to have gotten somehow miraculously lucky, and I have not noticed any yellowing on my Ratchet, really. There is definitely some difference in tone between the painted canopy section, the white paint, and like the white plastic around it, but I haven't noticed any yellowing. I'm hoping that remains to be the case as time goes on, because I'm probably tipping my hand a little bit, but I freaking love this figure. And yeah, I really hope that it stays nice and pristine. And if it doesn't, then I hope that we get some kind of high quality, oversized, slightly re-engineered knockoff of this, because I do really, really like this figure. But with all of that out of the way, let us get started. So, Bumblebee movie Ratchet is a little pod van thing with a canopy cockpit section that looks like something out of Robotech or Battletech. Battletech. I'm going to re-record this part. So moving past all the potential QC stuff, which I seem to have lucked out on, I do really, really like this figure, and there's some really interesting stuff going on with the vehicle mode. It is kind of reminiscent of an Earth mode ambulance. I mean, not really, but like, this looks like it could be, maybe if you take the giant cannon off, it looks like maybe it could be some kind of APC or medical vehicle, just due to the red and white color scheme from something like, say, Lost in Space or some other heavy sci-fi thing. It's an interesting shape, and it does kind of, this is where I get kind of that like Lost in Space vibe. The new Netflix Lost in Space, not classic Lost in Space. With just like the multifaceted windows, and it almost kind of looks like something out of Battletech, like a mech cockpit or something like that, which is cool. And it does that thing I love that they did with Siege Ratchet, where it's got this really nice deep blue inside like all of the white. I love that color combination. And this is just a fun little boxy thing that looks vaguely reminiscent of a Earth mode ambulance because of the red and white color scheme, but I think it conveys what it needs to. I like that they painted the rims, kind of, it does count as rims on the wheels. There is a lot of detail on the back that's not painted, which probably could stand to be painted, but you know, not a huge problem. And the color separation is pretty nice. I like that you do have these bits of gray along the top, but there's just actually a couple of spots of it, so it doesn't really bother me. I don't think it stands out too much, and I think having it along the top isn't a bad thing. I don't think it like wrecks the color scheme elsewhere on the figure. I do kind of wish that the gun could store on the underside, but there's not enough room under there. And that's about all I've got to say about this vehicle mode, really. I do think it's cool. Like I said before, I like the canopy and the colors and everything. I think it's great. And it's just this cute little compact... It reads as a Ratchet alt mode, but very kind of weird, futuristic, and cool. Which is a weird thing to say about a Ratchet alt mode. Just recorded half of this video without having the thing off to the side like I've normally been doing. I completely forgot to do that. In terms of size, Studio Series Bumblebee movie Ratchet is a deluxe, but as far as Studio Series deluxes for the live-action movies go, he's relatively tall. Not tall for a regular deluxe, but tall for a Studio Series deluxe that's based on the live-action movies, at least the Bumblebee stuff, because, you know, Bumblebee, Ron, Sideswipe, Jazz, they're very small deluxes. I don't have an issue with that, just saying. Which I think is fine, like, he compacts nicely. It's also maybe not as wide, maybe not as long, but a little bit taller, I think, than some deluxe vehicles. Ratchet's transformation is actually kind of great, especially for a mainline Studio Series deluxe. So much of the stuff that they do is really clever in terms of how they compact everything. Like the way that the canopy section, a decent chunk of the top of the vehicle accordions down into the torso. The fact that the entire upper body essentially comes from turning the back part of the vehicle inside out. the way that the legs tuck inside and curl up around the pelvis, like even the feet curl up around the pelvis. There's just so many interesting steps to the transformation. And I can't help but feel like maybe some third-party Masterpiece style figures were an influence in this design, because I can't think of the last time I encountered an official Transformers figure where the transformation involved a decent amount of turning them inside out. There may be some out there, but I can't think of it. It's the kind of trick that I normally see with like Unique Toys live action movie figures. And it's really interesting and cool to see Hasbro adopt a similar approach. I'm not saying they took it from Unique Toys, but it is similar in its own way. But like, it's been cool to see Hasbro and Takara adopt that kind of an approach, not just to mainline figures, but to a freaking deluxe. And what we're left with is this Bumblebee movie Ratchet. And I absolutely adore this design for Ratchet. Like, I've got my own weird aesthetic biases for all kinds of things when it comes to Transformers, but I think this is actually my favorite robot design from the Bumblebee movie. Like, out of all of them. I mean all of them. There's just something about this design for Ratchet that is... I'm just so into it. Part of it is because I've always really liked Ratchet's design in terms of like the color scheme. I really like the predominantly white with red accents, and then that nice deep blue that they typically have for either the windshield or the eyes. Well, it's not necessarily a deep blue for, you know, like the G1 stuff, but I always really like that color scheme. What they did with it here is amazing. The proportions of this robot mode are fantastic. He feels like... It's hard for me to put into words, but I feel that it's sort of like they made him stocky without making him stocky, if that makes any kind of sense. He doesn't feel like he's been like squished down and out, but he still feels like he's got the adequate amount of height, but also a really nice amount of bulk without actually making him appear stocky, but it kind of feels like he's stocky. I'm talking in circles, I don't know. I'm just really excited about this robot mode. I love the color distribution here. I feel like... I really don't know. Aside from the back of the vehicle mode feeling like maybe it could use a little bit of paint, I don't necessarily feel like the robot mode could use any. Like a little bit more color breakup, I would not complain about, but I feel like what is here is completely fine. I really don't have any complaints. And I also like how they managed to do the color breakup in a way that still very much reads like Ratchet. I mean, it reads like Ratchet because it's a white robot with red accents and a blue windscreen on his chest. But more than that, you've got the red in the shoulders, that it's not the same pattern, but it still evokes the red that Ratchet had on his shoulders for, you know, the red cross symbol. You got the red midsection, you got the blue in the chest, you got the red horns with the gray face. It all just works, and they even went as far as to paint the faux tires on the outside of his calves gray to match the gray from the real tires on the inside of his calves. And there's even the fact that the side flaps of the vehicle, with the whole thing turning inside out for the torso, end up inverting and making the back of the figure. It completely closes off the hollowness that you would see. Maybe not hollowness, but it closes off the gaps you would see on the back of the torso with these flaps. So it gets the kibble out of the way and covers up a void. Yes, the backs of his calves are hollow, but who cares? It's the backs of his calves, it's for transformation. All that space is being used in vehicle mode, so I don't really have a problem with it. And again, he's a mainline deluxe. It would have been cool if those filled in somehow, but yeah. I like that a lot of the tabs and peg holes and stuff, they actually kind of work with the molding, so they don't stand out as much as tabs and peg holes. And it's just really cool. It's a really awesome design. I cannot get over that engineering, the whole turning things inside out and accordioning in, and the fact that everything locks together so that he still gets a waist swivel, but it locks the other joints in place that are only there for the transformation, so you don't have to worry about things that you don't actually want moving in robot mode moving. It just shores up really, really nicely. And as I said, I adore this design. I love the cockpit canopy, whatever you want to call it, for the torso. Like that shape, the multifaceted window with that really nice blue just looks really cool, and it really drives home the whole overly sci-fi Cybertronian design of the alt mode and the robot mode, because, you know, Cybertronian. And I have no real complaints. The only knock I would really have against this is the white that they painted on the canopy doesn't really necessarily match the plastic, but it's close enough that it's not that big a deal. Also, I do wish that this figure wasn't necessarily a ticking time bomb of turning beige. As far as just the actual design, looking at it as a figure as it is now in my hands without any signs of yellowing or anything like that, I love this. I absolutely love this. Now, he has his rifle, which is a fine-looking rifle. I have no idea how G1 referential it is or isn't. It's covered in detail, which is kind of what I would expect for a movie figure. It's a chunk of plastic, it's not painted, which I think is fine. I prefer that they don't paint the accessories if it means being able to put more paint on the figure. That I'm fine with. There is this squared-off peg on the side of the gun that you can use to peg into the squared-off peg hole in the back, and that acts as weapon storage. And I think that's actually pretty cool. I like how he can just store his gun back there. Or you could, you know, do the obvious thing and take it off of his back and peg it into his hand, in which case he's got his rifle in his hand to shoot Decepticons with, because that's what medics do. And as I said, I just absolutely adore this figure. It is wonderful. This is, it's a thought that popped in my head a couple of times while I've been rambling, and I keep forgetting to talk about it because I go off on other tangents, but this feels like, in terms of like proportions and detailing and stuff, this feels like what Perfect Effects Fall of Cybertron Ratchet should have been. Now, I know that's a weird thing to say. What I mean is, the Fall of Cybertron Ratchet design was cool. I really liked that design. It was nice and chunky and beefy, and I thought it was a cool design. The Perfect Effect figure for that Ratchet, it hits a lot of the same design cues, but it lost some of that chunk, which I'm sure is more to do with, you know, it being a physical toy. It needs to actually transform. It's nothing against Planet X. Did I say Perfect Effect? I may have said Perfect Effect. I meant Planet X. Point is, I feel like they did a great job with what they could with that design, but it didn't really have the chunk that I really thought Fall of Cybertron Ratchet's in-game design needed in a toy. This has that chunk in proportions. It's not the same design, it is a completely different design, but it still comes across to me like how that design should have come across in a toy, or rather how I would have preferred that design to come across in a toy, if any of that rambling makes sense. Yeah, I feel like I'm just talking in circles now, so let's take a look at that head sculpt. And the head sculpt is very, very Ratchet. It's got all the same main design cues, like the red horns, the white helmet, the, in this case, silver, but, you know, like a gray face. The overall shape is pretty consistent with what Ratchet's head is supposed to look like. I mean, yeah, they definitely Cybertron live-actioned it up, but it's Ratchet. It's obviously Ratchet. Some really nice detailing on there, too. In terms of articulation, the head is on a ball joint, but unlike other toys, the ball socket is not in the head, the ball socket is in the torso, which in this case I think actually works in the figure's favor because it allows him a pretty okay amount of up and down and side to side tilt motion. The shoulders can do a full 360, they can go in and out to about 90 degrees. You get a bicep swivel, you get a almost ever so slightly less than 90-degree elbow, and it can also bend backwards, which is for the transformation. No forearm or wrist rotation, but you can unclick the wrist and bend it in if you want. Despite the complexities of the transformation around the torso, you do get a waist swivel, which is really nice. The legs can go forward and back pretty much 90 degrees or ever so slightly beyond 90. They can go out 90. You get a thigh swivel, which is also necessary for the transformation. You get a 90-degree knee bend. It looks like it can bend further than that, but I don't want to force it. It feels like I'm flexing plastic, so I'm just going to leave it at the 90-degree thing. And then for the feet, you do get ankle tilt, and then if you want, you can use the transformation joint to point the toe, though it does start to reveal some gaps if you point it too far. He is, I want to say, almost standard deluxe height. Might be a teeny bit shorter, maybe a teeny bit taller, depending on what you consider standard deluxe. But as far as live action Studio Series deluxes go, I think he's, you know, more on the tall-ish side, like I said before with the Viet mode, him being a little bigger. Not huge, You know, he's still, as you can see, not as tall as Spinister, which is a tall deluxe, but he's got some pretty decent height on him for a live-action Studio Series figure. And I think that is going to do it for this guy. He is, as I said, very cool, and it's hard to say, but I think for now he might actually be my favorite live-action Studio Series figure. That is subject to change based on stuff that comes out in the future, we'll see. But I really like this. Between the transformation, the way he compacts, and just how freaking cool he looks in robot mode, I am just very much into this. And weirdly, I think I actually prefer this to what I've seen of the Ironhide. Not to say that I think that design is bad, I just prefer the white with red accents rather than red with white or black or gray accents. Anyway, that does it for Studio Series Bumblebee Ratchet. What do you all think of this guy? Whatever your thoughts, feel free to chime in down below. I always enjoy hearing from you all. Thank you everybody for watching, and remember, art is more than meets the eye.